something that is about equality of opportunity. And you cannot have equality of opportunity if you're dead. So Medicare for all.
Okay. Go ahead. You know. So a couple of notes in response to the Medicare for all shtick. So this is Bernie Sanders shtick, obviously. The problem with Medicare for all is that when people say that it's affordable, this isn't affordable to the person who has the Medicare. It is not affordable to the country. In fact, it is so unaffordable to the country that the state of California was a nut job leftist state, just refused to even pass Medicare for all because it would have immediately doubled the debt.
So when you say tax revenue is at its highest point, now you know that that's misleading because everything economically is at its highest point, meaning that we have a lot more people in the country than we did in the 1950s and 60s, so hence we are collecting more overall taxes. But the reality is, as a percentage, it is clearly down. The top bracket now is around 39%. It used to be at 91%. That's inarguable, right?
But our economy is significantly larger than it was then, and part of that is because of reductions in taxes over previous decades.
Well, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious. If you're uneducated, please at least don't make it obvious. The Republican Party at this point is completely dependent on their donors. And by the way, don't get me wrong, the Democratic Party is also largely dependent on their donors. I think the Republicans are a tiny bit more corrupt. But so I think that their donors are going to demand those tax cuts. And if I am right, and we'll all see this, because it's something that's going to happen later, not something that has happened, they will do everything. They will move mountains to make sure that those rich donors and corporations will get their tax cuts.
Okay, so this is an interesting case where I say to Cenk's prognostication from his mouth to God's ears, and he says about mine from my mouth to God's ears, because I don't think they're going to pass anything, because I think that there's a high-level incompetence inside the Republican caucus, and it's pretty fractious. But I do want to go back to a couple of points, because you actually hit on some major thematic points. You talked about roads and the fact that we need roads in order to get to work. This is a point Elizabeth Warren made, and obviously a point that President Obama made at the time. I don't think anyone argues that we don't need roads to get to work. The problem is that when you're talking about roads as a percentage of the budget, we are talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the federal budget and of the state budget and even of the local budget. So the idea that you're justifying massive tax rates on corporations in order to pay for roads is just intellectually dishonest. It's a tiny, the stuff that we agree on, that government should spend on, is a tiny percentage of spending, right? It's all the other stuff that we disagree on. As far as the idea that I'm somehow being, dismissive toward people who are buying hamburgers, I'm not. I'm saying the people who are poor need to buy hamburgers to feed their children. They don't have the money to invest in building an iPhone, because when you're just trying to get by and you are living in a Walmart subsistence economy, you're using that money to buy the products and services you need to get by. That does not create new products and services that become cheaper over time through competition. You need somebody to make those investments. You said this about Glass-Steagall, for example. You said the banks, they might make their own investments. In what? In what? They're not investing in themselves. I mean, they have to take that money and then they have to use it to invest in something else. Places like Apple, some that fail and some that succeed. This idea that banks are somehow evils is just not the case unless you are talking about them working in Congress. Here you and I agree, working in congruity with a Congress, with a legislature that is attempting to give them kickbacks. Both you and I agree on this. So, and finally, as far as the idea that Republicans pass tax cuts because they're beholden to their donors, okay, and Democrats pass tax increases because the unions give them hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and I don't see Democrats complain about this.
So, you got me there. The unions give money to the Democrats.
As far as the idea that all money should be out of politics, here's the problem. Okay, TYT, we both have corporations, and we expound upon politics every single day. And we motivate thousands of people, right, every day on both sides of the aisle. That is effectively an in-kind contribution. Now, you campaigned with Bernie Sanders. Did you do it because you expected? That's fine. Did you do that because you supported Bernie Sanders, or did you do that because you expected some gimme for TYT in return? I assume you did it because you supported Bernie Sanders, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so the point that I am making is to attribute to everyone else bad intent when it comes to political spending in politics, but to yourself it's totally fine. And when it comes to other media entities that give in-kind contributions on a regular basis through their coverage, this is... when the New York Times, which is biased to the left, spends an inordinate amount of time and money reporting on Mitt Romney's idiotic stories about how he was in high school and cutting a gay kid's hair in 1932, if you're saying to me that that is less impactful on the political sphere than a corporation, which is a group giving money to a political candidate for purposes of supporting that candidate, I fail to see how you can say for yourself that you are innocent in this, but everyone else is guilty. I don't believe that. Either everyone's guilty or everybody is innocent, or if you can find the actual cases of guilt where there's a quid pro quo, then we agree. That's prosecutable, right?
Yes.
So, other point, when you talked about the 2008 economy, you talked about Glass-Steagall and how this led to the crash. The real reason that the crash happened had far less to do with Glass-Steagall. I opposed the bailouts, by the way. It had far less to do with Glass-Steagall than it had to do with the fact that the federal government was actively promulgating the notion that corporations should give subprime mortgages to people who are not qualified as people who could take out loans. This meant that, as you say, corporations are not inherently conservative, they're not inherently free market, they're inherently profit-driven. So if they felt that they could give a bunch of subprime mortgages and this would inflate the real estate prices, and if things went wrong, they just foreclose on the nearest house, and the market just keeps going up and up and up, and they can just, as you say, turn these into derivatives and sell them on the open market by pretending that these are all good loans because they have government backing, then of course you're going to get an inflated, overheated real estate market. But the question there is not the workings of the free market, it's the combination that you like in a mixed economy, that I hate. Okay, I hate mixed economies in the sense that I don't believe that capitalism and socialism should be mixed, that corporatism is the solution. Okay, what you're talking about is corporatism. You're talking about Glass-Steagall, which freed getting rid of Glass-Steagall, it freed the corporations to invest in a free market manner, but also they gave a bailout to all of these corporations by essentially incentivizing them to give a bunch of bad loans, knowing that if things went bad, then all the losses would be socialized. The problem there is not the free market. The problem there is a government that is acting as a backstop for bad decisions in the free market by profit-driven corporations.
Okay. All right, I love that. There was a lot to respond to there, so let me try to take it one at a time. So first off, I love the idea that the government made the banks do the subprime mortgages, and golly gee, the government twisted the banks' arm when they made billions upon billions of dollars. Oh man, don't make me make another billion. Don't make me make another billion. No, they did those, if they thought they were going to lose money off of it, they would have a fiduciary responsibility not to do it.
I agree.
Okay, they were not forced to make billions of dollars. They were not forced to then have us bail them out. Right. They did all of that because there's legalized bribery in America.
Right, because the government was giving them money, correct.
So now let me address that. You say, well, what's the difference between your speech and their speech? Mine is actually speech, and theirs is money. So there's a giant difference.
But you spend money on your speech.
First off, so they say, no, Supreme Court says, no, money is speech now. No, money is property. It's not speech. And so if money was speech, well, then if you go to a hooker and you say, oh, no, officer, I was just talking to her. Okay, money is not speech. So, for example, to give you a sense of it, to compare me saying I like Bernie Sanders and you saying whoever you like is the equivalent of this is obviously nonsensical. I believe it's obvious. So in a recent five-year period, the top 200 corporate givers, they both in donations and in lobbying spent $5.8 billion, okay? So that is not the same thing as me saying, hey, I like what Bernie's saying about college and Medicare. And when they did, why do you think they did? It was not because, hey, they genuinely like Bernie or Trump or Hillary. Because in return for that $5.8 billion, they got $4.4 trillion in government subsidies. So, which leads to, I actually think, the biggest point here, the difference between big government and small government. So, a lot of times conservatives say, oh, you guys like big government. That's not true. So let me explain. If I asked you, hey, you got a plumbing job, what would you like, big pipes or small pipes? I don't know. What's the job we have? It depends. It's the same thing with the government. Okay, what size government would you like? I don't know. What's the job we have? So to say big government or small government doesn't make any sense. So, for example, do I want a big government that invades Iraq? Hell no, I don't. No way. And Ben, you were vociferously for the Iraq war, so in that sense, you loved big government. Couldn't get enough of it. And I could go on and on and on. Republicans say, no, 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 we don't like big government, but we'd like to be inside your uterus. So just admit it. It's no problem. Just say it. Say, I love big government. It's okay. So you're talking about when you like when you're rich and you want tax cuts. Oh, no, I don't want big government. I want small government. But when it's convenient for you and you'd like oil subsidies and you'd like wars and you'd like to meddle in people's private lives, then you love big government.
Okay, so I need to respond to some of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to point out that Cenk's big government, small government dichotomy was proposed by you, not by me. I talk about the proper scope of the government's involvement in particular areas the same way that you do, and we may disagree on all of that. My point is that overall, if you're talking about the level of government spending, it needs to go down, and you believe that it really needs to go up. Okay, so it's disingenuous.
It depends. Not on war, does it?
No, but overall.
Not on the war on drugs. Not on so many of those wasteful programs. It depends. But
overall, you want the federal budget increased. Overall, I would like the federal budget decreased. To pretend that this is not true is to lie. Okay, and when you suggest that there is no difference between, we just have different visions of what the government should cover, these things cost different things. Okay, the war in Iraq was very expensive. You know what's more expensive? Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All of these are vastly more expensive than the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, as far as this, again, going back to this idea that, again, I don't like this big government dichotomy any more than you do, in the sense that you say, well, it's big government for the government to get inside people's wombs. And I say that it is the government's job to preserve life, liberty, and property, and one of those things is life. To protect you from someone else taking it. Okay, to protect you from someone else taking it. Now, when it comes to the idea that all money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, final question, final point on, we're going through 10 points at a time here, but final point here. When you say money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, Buddy Roemer gave you $4 million to start TYT. What did he expect in return? Should he not have given you money? Was the money not speech? It was just money, after all. It's just like a hooker, I assume. So are you the prostitute? How did this work? When you take money from Al Jazeera, does that make you a hooker for the Qataris? How does that work?
That was an awesome conflation. Okay, we were talking about money in politics and how money is not speech when you give it as a campaign donation, and you turn it around to a business investment. In a business investment, it has nothing to do with speech. Money is money. They gave us an investment, because they believed in our business. That has nothing to do with politics.
That's great. And you think the government is in the business of regulating business. So if the government is in the business of regulating business, what would be the problem with the government telling Buddy Roemer he is not allowed to invest in your business?
No, those are two different issues. No problem. No, one thing is to say, hey, let's set reasonable limitations on what can happen around elections, which is, again, what most developed Western countries do. And they have different versions of that rule. There's ads you can run, you can't run ads within a certain period of time. You have public financing versus private financing. Those are rules around an election. That is a completely different issue than the government saying randomly you can and you can't invest in businesses.
Why?
So you're conflating those two issues that have nothing to do with one another.
Why?
So let's just
what does why mean?
Because
you believe in education, so why don't you believe in healthcare?
Because it's a free country, and I get to spend my money wherever I damn well please.
All right. So as we're coming to the close here, we're going to do one more.
I gotta ask him. All
right, very quick.
You damn well please. Okay, so when the Koch brothers or Bloomberg or Soros puts in hundreds of millions of dollars into elections, you think, well, I just do them because they're good guys and they damn well please buying all those politicians. Or you think, no, the politicians would never be affected by hundreds of millions of dollars in legalized bribes.
Okay.
And you can't just spend your money anywhere you want. Of course there are rules. You can't bribe people.
Right.
There's many things you can't do with your money. And one of those should be bribing politicians, but we made it legal.
Cenk,
so I'm curious what your opinion on that is. Do you think that they're just golly shucks, they just mean well?
Cenk, you're a lawyer, so you know that bribery requires two parties to the bribe. If I give money to a politician, there must be something in return. If there is no quid pro quo, there is no bribery.
You think there's nothing in return?
Well, you
think the politicians don't do those favors?
I think very often there is something in return, but I want you to point me to the things that are in return, not just say that all spending on politics ought to be forbidden except for the Young Turks.
No, that is of course not what we say. If you want to get money out of politics and then you said the Young Turks cannot donate money to politicians, I'd say, of course, that's the whole point of getting money out of politics.
Wait, so
so
Cenk.
So this idea that
Come on.
It's so disingenuous. Even if you're a Republican and you're a conservative, you think there isn't crony capitalism? You think that $4.4 trillion that went in subsidies isn't
question.
because they got campaign donations? You know it's because they got campaign donations.
Cenk, okay, final question.
This is going to be the last word on this.
Final thing here on this, okay? Final question on this. So, Young Turks is super successful. We have 80 million uniques. It's wonderful. Do you think Bernie Sanders would care more if you gave him $10,000 or if you dedicated your entire network to kissing his ass for an election cycle?
What would I want on? Look, this idea of the identity, that Democrats want identity politics, and some of them do. But let's not forget that Republicans do the same and worse. Who was the one who came up with the Southern strategy? That was the Republican Party. And the Southern strategy was, let's go get racist white voters in the South. That's a fact. So, once again, it's this wonderful capitalist invention called Google. Google it. So two Republican chairmen have said, yes, we did do that strategy and we apologize. So that's a fact. They're the ones who invented identity politics. So when you like identity politics when it serves your interests, but all of a sudden when we say, hey, can black people have the same rights as white people? Oh, identity politics. Can gay people have the same rights as straight people? Identity politics. It's called equality. Look into it. It's called America. Okay?
All right, well, I think we now know.
USA! USA! USA!
All right.
Equality for all of us!
Okay.
All right.
I want to respond to this is a
Ben,
point.
just very quickly, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
This is very quick, okay?
Very quick.
Okay, I want to respond to a point. This is a point that Cenk made last year in his debate with Dinesh repeatedly for about an hour. Was the Southern strategy with regard to the Republicans. Okay, I'd like to point out the idea that the entire South solidly moved into the Republican category because of the Civil Rights Act is historically false and has been debunked multiple times by people ranging from Sean Trent at Real Clear Politics to professors at the University of Pennsylvania. And there's a bunch of ways to debunk it, including the fact that the Congress did not switch Republican in the South until 1994. Okay, did it take 30 years for the racists to realize what was going on? 21 senators from the South were Democrats. How many of them became Republicans after the Civil Rights Act? The answer, 1. The other 20 stayed Democrats. In 1952, Eisenhower did not win a ton of the South. Eisenhower did win, however, 7 states in the South in 1956, after he sent federal troops down south. The reason that the Republican Party started to win in the South, it began in the 1950s, not after the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and it was largely due to the movement of industry down south. It was new fringe members of the Republican Party, younger members of the Republican Party, who switched over to the Republican Party in the South, not old Democrats, who remained old Democrats and are still old Democrats today.
All right. So I'm going to jump in here.
Okay, I got it real quick. You're right.
Very quick.
By the way, final note, Jimmy
the
Carter launched his 1980 campaign at the headquarters, that town in Alabama that was the headquarters for the KKK. So to pretend that it was only Republicans playing the bad and evil race strategy is just a lie.
All right.
Okay.
Last word.
So,
this will be the last word.
Hello, my name is Jane. I'm social justice waste. Agree with me or you'll be shamed. Hello, my name is Jane. I'm social justice waste.